Back in with you next hour. Former President Biden is now rebuking Trump's statement about Biden using an auto pen to sign executive orders, rejecting any claims that actions were done without his knowledge. Quote, "Let me be clear. I made the decisions during my presidency. I made the decisions about the pardons, executive orders, legislations, and proclamations. Any suggestion that I didn't is ridiculous and false." This denial comes amid President Trump alleging the Biden White House relied on an auto pen to sign executive orders. Here now is Larry Behrens, spokesperson for the Power of the Future, which is a nonprofit organization that advocates for American energy jobs. All right, so there's been a lot of concern about this. Power of the Future reviewed 8 Biden executive orders that it says were significant shifts in domestic energy policy. So, right? You're questioning Biden's use of auto pen for executive orders. So tell us more about that.
Absolutely. What we did, Laura, is we looked at these executive orders and we wanted to examine, did Joe Biden ever talk about them personally? Or was it a press release? Or was it through a spokesperson? And those orders, which were significant for American energy, he never really talked about it. And let's be clear, it was about a year ago when Speaker Mike Johnson met with Joe Biden and they discussed Biden's administration's pause on liquefied natural gas exports. And Joe Biden allegedly told Speaker Johnson he didn't do that, when in fact the administration had to do that. So there was some discussion over what did Joe Biden know and when did he know it with these orders, and they are absolutely significant. So the question needs to be asked in a whole lot of these instances of, are they using auto pen for these, and who gave the orders to do it, and was it the president? Now, I saw the statement. The president said that he was absolutely in charge, but it is also, I think, ironic that that statement came out again through a spokesperson and not from the president himself.
That is interesting. And, you know, a lot of people are weighing in on this. Let's take a listen to former President Bill Clinton on Biden's health. Talk to you on the other side.
All I can say is whenever I was around him, his mind was clear, his judgment was good, and he was on top of his brief. All I know is I think we should think less about that and more about the future.
Yeah.
We now know President...
That's right.
We know President Reagan had clear signs of Alzheimer's in his last 2 years. We know Woodrow Wilson, after his stroke, couldn't make any decisions, and his wife made them. Now, some people think that's the best of both worlds.
All right, so what do you make of what Clinton had to say?
I note a couple of things. President Clinton has made denials in the past, 30 years old, that turned out to absolutely be true. But more importantly, he had the qualifier there, didn't he, when I was around him? How often was President Clinton around him? No one asked that follow-up question. And these are the questions that the American people should know. The most concerning part is the notion of we should just turn on from this. If there was a major cover-up, which Congress is going to investigate and look into, then we need to know who was involved, how it can happen, so it can't happen again. This should be a bipartisan issue that says we elect a president, that president is in charge, not faceless bureaucrats who are unaccountable to the public. And so if it was Joe Biden, then the investigation will bear that out. But I'd be extremely hesitant to take President Clinton's word, who says the few times I was around him, it worked out really great.
Yeah, and let's talk about how that can be proven, about the auto pen, or disproven. How does this type of investigation work?
Yeah, it's such a great question, Laura. You know, I've worked in an office where an auto pen was in use, and it's not talking out of school that the auto pen is used to sometimes sign orders that aren't of big importance, sometimes declarations that aren't of big importance. But in major orders, it should be done by the president, him or herself. But you have people who are authorized to use it, and you have people who then talk to the folks who are authorized to use it. And so I would imagine that there's opportunity to say, these are the folks who had access to be able to auto pen the president's signature. These are the people they report to. When they were filling out these orders, if they were auto-penned, who gave the orders to do it? Does that go up to the president, or does it not go up to the president? And so I think when the House Oversight Committee has started to look at specific people who worked in the Biden White House, that's where they want to start and have those discussions.
Okay, and we've got to be fair here because Trump has used an auto pen as well. So how is it different? Does it have to do with what's being signed as you just discussed, or, you know, is it different at all?
Yeah, and that's another great point that can come up from this is when is something auto pen worthy, right? And when does it really need to be signed by the president? And you make a great point. I'm sure they do use an auto pen in the Trump White House. However, I think President Trump, since his first day back in office, has been very clear of you see these executive orders, they discuss what the executive order does, and you see him physically sign it himself so that the American people know this was the president making the decision. And the president himself said, if there was a decision that came out with my signature on it that I wasn't aware of and I heard about it, I would hear about it very quickly. And that, again, is a sharp contrast to what President Biden allegedly told Speaker Johnson when it came to pausing liquefied natural gas, that he didn't know about it. And keep in mind, I'll just throw in another one. We had a news reporter ask Joe Biden if he had declared a climate crisis, and he said, I already have, when in fact he hadn't. So there is a concerning pattern here for sure.
All right. Well, we'll see where the investigation leads us. Power the Future's Larry Behrens, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Great.
And turning now to this.